Okay, good evening to everyone. Welcome to all our guests who've come from near and far. Welcome to Tel Aviv University and to the Porter School of the Environment and Earth Sciences. A special thanks to Gabi and Aryel David, wife and son of Dan David, Zichrono Livracha, our past president of Tel Aviv University, Professor Yossi Klafter, our host here, Dame Shirley Porter, and our other honored guests, Tel Aviv University faculty, students, and the general public. My name's Colin Pryce, and tonight I'm wearing a few different hats. My first hat is as a climate scientist. I studied climate change and global warming from the time of my PhD more than 25 years ago. And today there's little debate amongst the scientists that climate change is real and likely the most urgent global problem facing the world today. And this problem needs to be addressed now in order to prevent irreversible climate change in the future, what we scientists call tipping points. My second hat is as an educator, a university professor, and the head of the Environmental Studies Department here in the Porter School. And it's appropriate that this event is being held here in the Porter building, since this building represents ways of combating climate change, being the greenest building in Israel and perhaps the greenest building in the Middle East. Finally, my third hat is as a member of the Dan David Prize Committee that chose Christiana Figueres as the 2019 single prize winner for the topic of combating climate change. We had 41 extremely impressive files to go through, some having CVs longer than 100 pages, but finally Christiana came out on top. Is that Christiana? She's in big trouble, Christiana. Yeah, unless that's Theresa May calling. It's done. So this evening is a collaboration between the Dan David Foundation and the Israel Society of Ecology and Environmental Sciences. The society is having its annual conference here in the building in the coming 2 days. It also publishes a journal called Ecology and Environment, which I have over here, a copy. And the version which came out this week has an article there about an interview with Christiana. It's a journal of science and environmental policy, which is the leading Hebrew scientific publication in the field of environment. Before I ask Christiana to come and give us her talk, I'd like to invite Aryel David, son of Dan David, to address the audience. You need this because they want for the film too. So you can say names. Put it in the pocket.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin. Good evening to you all. And thank you for allowing me to address on behalf of the Dan David Foundation and the Dan David Prize this important gathering, which marks the opening of the 47th Annual Conference for Science and the Environment. So as befits such an august occasion, I should begin my remarks with an inspirational quote from a highly reputable and respected source. And nothing is more authoritative than The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which carries on its cover one simple fundamental instruction, and I quote, "Don't panic." The Galactic Encyclopedia is, of course, the fictional product of the imagination of British author Douglas Adams, who, by the way, was not only a great science fiction writer and a brilliant humorist, but also a committed environmentalist and conservation activist. And another master of science fiction, Arthur C. Clarke, once said that Adams' singular commandment, "Don't panic," might be the best advice that could ever be given to humanity. And today I believe that "Don't panic" might also be the best way to summarize the work and the message to humanity that is being spread around the world by this conference's guest of honor, Christiana Figueres. From the highest political and diplomatic circles to the hearts and minds of citizens in every country across the globe, Christiana is fighting to introduce a new approach to facing the challenge of climate change. This approach, while still recognizing the absolute urgency of reducing carbon emissions, presents the climate crisis not as a doom and gloom scenario, but as an opportunity for humanity to come together to solve this massive problem and use it as an engine for technological and economic development, and as a way to introduce greater justice and equality into our societies. Christiana brought this attitude to her work as head of the UN Convention on Climate Change, introducing a creative and collaborative approach to negotiations, broadening the talks to include a large number of stakeholders, and hammering out an agreement that is based on shared benefits rather than a shared threat. Under her leadership, this effort culminated in the signing and ratification of the Paris Climate Accords, which for the first time united 195 countries in agreeing to tackle the challenge of climate change. Today, Christiana continues to refuse to label as impossible the enormous task that awaits us in dealing with global warming, and she continues to bring this "don't panic" message to all the facets of her public engagement with politicians, diplomats, corporate figures, and civil society. As some of you may know, last month, Christiana was here at Tel Aviv University to receive the 2019 Dan David Prize for the Future Time Dimension, which this year focused on combating climate change. And I think it took only a few hours for her to infect everyone she came into contact with what she called her stubborn optimism. So I'm really happy, Christiana, that you have returned so soon to Israel to participate in this conference. I'm glad not just because the Dan David Prize was in part built specifically to create and strengthen bonds between scientists, academics, and other leading figures in Israel and abroad, but especially because I do feel that we in Israel could use as much of your stubborn optimism as you can spare, not just on political or security matters, but on those same environmental issues that you champion. Maybe it is because we're a small nation and we think our behavior is of little consequence to the world at large, or maybe it's because we are preoccupied with many other crises, or because our leadership is uninterested or unable to deal with these issues. But whatever the reason, there is little doubt that Israel is surprisingly lagging behind on many key challenges of environmental protection. We favor road transportation over rail and other less polluting forms of mobility. We have set a goal of producing 10% of the country's energy through renewable sources by 2020, a modest objective compared to other Western nations, and one that is nevertheless unlikely to be met, given that we are still around 3% of that quota. We are an overpopulated country with little land that disposes of most of its trash in landfills. We recycle only about 20% of our household garbage, one of the lowest rates in the OECD. And just a few days ago, a report from the World Wildlife Fund found that Tel Aviv has the third highest level of plastic pollution on the Mediterranean coast. I'm sure that many of those present here are much more familiar than me with these and other problematic policies that do not befit a nation that is known throughout the world for its innovation and startup spirit. But on the other hand, that spirit has already led to many environmental success stories here, such as the leaps forward that Israel has made in water conservation, treatment, and desalination. So Israel clearly has the economic, social, and technological background to be a leader in the search for solutions to the world's ecological problems. So it is possible to look also at the local environment picture here in Israel with some stubborn optimism rather than panic. And I hope that in the coming days, with the discussions, collaborations, and creative ideas that certainly will emerge from this conference, you all will be able to share in that feeling and build on it with even greater confidence. To underline this sentiment, I think it's appropriate to conclude with another Douglas Adams quote. So in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the author elucidates with his trademark dry British wit why it is in fact dolphins rather than humans who are the smartest species on Earth. And I quote, "On the planet Earth, man had always assumed that he was more intelligent than dolphins because he had achieved so much, the wheel, New York, wars, and so on, whilst all the dolphins had ever done was muck about in the water having a good time. But the dolphins, conversely, had always believed that they were far more intelligent than man for precisely the same reasons." Now, as you probably have already gathered, I very much admire Douglas Adams, but when I look at the talent and knowledge and creativity assembled in this room and beyond these walls in Tel Aviv University, in Israel, and in the world at large, I do think that maybe for once we can prove him wrong. Thank you.
Need the mic back.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I now have the greatest pleasure and the tremendous honor to introduce Christiana Figueres to you this evening. Christiana was appointed Executive Secretary of the United Nations Climate Convention in June 2010, 6 months after the failed negotiations in Copenhagen in COP15. At that time, 2010, the global mood on climate change could not have been more pessimistic. For 6 years, Christiana worked tirelessly to bring 195 countries together to sign the Paris 2015 agreement for reducing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, while also addressing financial flows, technology, and capacity building in the developing world. It is the world's most far-reaching global climate agreement, and many claim it as the greatest diplomatic agreement in history. Without Christiana, the agreement would not have occurred. How did she do it? With her optimism and her attitude of failure is not an option. She has proved the power of optimism, collaboration, and a stubborn refusal to accept that the problems of our time are beyond our capacity to solve. She showed leaders of the world that the risk of action is less than the risk of inaction. And that by acting now, there are huge opportunities that can be gained, from cleaner air to innovative technologies and huge economic growth. But we have to act now. As 16-year-old Greta Thurman from Sweden says, act as if your house is on fire, because it is. Whether you measure Christiana's impact on tons of greenhouse gas emissions avoided, a transformed global diplomacy, or the encouragement of new innovative technologies, when talking about the health of the planet, no one has made a bigger contribution to our collective future than Christiana. I think the people in the audience will also be interested to know that Christiana has a personal connection to Israel. Her father was the president of Costa Rica 3 times. And during the first term in 1948, Costa Rica was one of the first countries to recognize the State of Israel. And in the 1980s, Christiana's mother was the Costa Rican ambassador to Israel. Finally, on a personal note, being the father of 3 daughters, and recently the grandfather of my first granddaughter, I'm thrilled that girls across the world have such an amazing role model to admire and to follow. So before I invite Christiana to the stage, we'd like to show a brief movie which was produced by the Dan David Foundation for the ceremony which we had a month ago. So if I can find the...
Impossible is not a fact. It's an attitude. It's only an attitude. And I decided that I was going to change my attitude, and I was going to help the world change its attitude on climate change. On December 12, 2015, in Paris, under the United Nations, 195 governments got together and unanimously decided to intentionally change the course of the global economy in order to protect the most vulnerable and improve the life of all of us. Now that is a remarkable achievement. I fundamentally believe not only that people are more motivated by positive than by negative, but also because there is such opportunity in addressing climate change. And I think, several years ago we made a huge mistake of putting out a doom and gloom message, unless we do this, some kind of apocalypse. Well, how is that going to get achieved? The fact is that there's such huge opportunities for job creation, for new technology, energy security, for food security, for water security. It's actually fundamentally much more of a good news agenda than it is a opportunity that all of us are having right now to realize and to be adults in the moment in which history and mankind are actually just in such incredible transformation.
Great. So I'd like to invite Christiana to the stage, please. She's going to present us a talk on running out of time. Can we choose a future of well-being? Christiana. You can find somewhere to put that.
Find somewhere to put it.
Clip it on somewhere.
Okay. No, women never have pockets. Right? Women never have pockets. Shalom. How are you all? I can just put it here. Is that right? Microphone. Is that better? Okay. Thank you. How are you? Good afternoon, I think. Or good evening. Thank you very much. It's wonderful, Gabi, to see you again. Ariel, thank you very much for yet another brilliant speech. Now we know what the power of the pen does in your hands. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to Cólin, to everyone here at the university. Thank you very much for an invitation to return to Israel, I think only 3 seconds after I just left, which is fantastic. Always wonderful to be here. Don't panic. So I hereby completely eradicate that title and change it to Don't Panic, because I love that. And that is really, as Ariel has already said, I think a very important message, but one that really calls for a very sophisticated calibration of our actions, because we don't have to panic, but we certainly have to act very quickly. And as we know, in any emergency, if you panic, you freeze and you don't do anything. You can't get it done. You can't get out of the emergency. We are in a climate emergency, so we shouldn't panic. We should actually do the right thing in a timely fashion. And that is, I think that is at the heart. I would like to, tonight, invite you to a little thought experiment, because this is a fantastic country in which you have proven so many times that the impossible is not a fact, it's an attitude, which is one of my mantras. And Israel has made so many things that would have been impossible in other countries. You have actually been able to make it possible. There are a few other things still pending, as Ariel has reminded us, but the trajectory of the country has been set. And so I wanted to invite you in that spirit to a little thought experiment that would trace the energy transformation that is already happening. It's already happening in many countries around the world, and I wanted to unpack that a little bit with you, understanding that this is the first time that humankind actually does an energy transformation that is intentional. Because the last energy transformation, in fact, all of the last ones that we have had over the 6,000 years in which we have been modern humans on this planet, every energy transformation before this one has been an energy transformation that was actually taken forward or led forward by technology or by a discovery of a resource. So think about the last one, the Industrial Revolution, in which we moved into the era of fossil fuels. That happened not because humankind got together and decided, right, we are now going to move to fossil fuels. No, it happened because we discovered fossil fuels under the ground, and then we developed the technologies, the internal combustion engine and many other technologies to take advantage of those fuels. So it was technology driven and resource and technology driven. It was not intentional. There was never a decision to change, to go from horse and buggy to cars. This is the first time, as was put in the video, that all 195 countries got together in 2015, and we can discuss the United States later, and actually took a very deliberate decision to change the trajectory of energy and to move toward renewable energy as one part of addressing climate change, not the only, because there are many others as well. Certainly land use being of an equally important one. But tonight I just want to focus on the energy transition. And what is amazing is that these countries have actually set an intentional direction and decided on a timing, on a deadline. And they have said by 2050, the entire global economy has to be climate neutral or zero net emissions, which is what science had established, but we needed the political imprimatur to ensure that science would be followed. And that is what is at the heart of the Paris Agreement. Not an easy thing to follow. So once they had decided, now we're into the next chapter, which is how do you actually implement that. And here a quick parenthesis that the UK, the United Kingdom, why is this falling? That the UK is the first G7 country, thank you. The United Kingdom is the first G7 country to have officially adopted now in legal form a climate neutrality target for 2050. They just did that, thank you. They just did that a few days ago under the vanishing leadership of Theresa May. And with that, I just wanted to excuse myself because I have a hard stop tonight because I have to be on the phone with Theresa May to actually record the legacy that she has chosen to give to the world. I'm sure you understand that she's concerned about her legacy, having made such a mess of Brexit, and she's really concerned about how is history going to view her. And so she has used the last little bit of political capital that she has left before she leaves 10 Downing Street to set into law the fact that the UK will be climate neutral by 2050, which is exactly what we need all countries to do. So kudos to Theresa May for that legacy, not for others, but certainly for that. And I excuse myself that I have a hard stop tonight that is totally out of my control. Close parenthesis. The energy transformation that we're now seeing and that is already underway is, as I said, it's directional. It has a very, very clear direction toward decarbonizing. It has a clear timing, 2050. But it's also, and I think this is the exciting part, it's multidimensional because it's not just about energy. And all of these dimensions actually reinforce each other. It used to be that we thought that the energy transformation or addressing climate change was actually just an environmental issue. Wrong. It is, in fact, it has a environmental impact, certainly, but it actually has many other dimensions that are already unfolding before our eyes. So I wanted to take you into a thought experiment of these dimensions. Let me do this in the following way. The world, I think, is divided into those who think in a very structured form and those who think in a more flowing form. So I have a daughter that thinks very structurally. She wakes up with an Excel sheet for her daily obligations. And I have another daughter who is very free-flowing and has no idea what she's going to be doing today, tomorrow, or in fact, over the next 3 months. And so, I have huge appreciation and respect for both ways of thinking. So to those of you who are very structured, I just wanted to first give you the structure of what I'm going to share with you, and that is, I'm going to talk about 7 dimensions. of the energy transition, and I'm going to organize them just to help you structure in your head. I'm going to organize them according to social, economic, and political dimensions. How many of you think that way, structured? About half. Okay, or more than half. Now, for those of you who are free-flowing, my hippie daughter, for example, don't worry about it, just go with the flow. How many of you just go with the flow in life? Maybe you have a better quality of life. We'll see. In an event, 7 dimensions. And just to keep it a little bit in the easier side, I've actually decided that all of them begin with D. So, here we go. On the social side, the energy transformation that we're seeing from fossil fuels to renewable energies, to solar, geothermal, water, hydro, plus many others that will be developed over time, maritime, renewable energy. Think how that transformation from fossils to renewable energy is actually being incredibly disruptive. Disruptive is sort of, the word that everybody likes, and everything has to be disruptive, and I never know whether this being disruptive is actually good or bad news. It used to be bad news. Now apparently it's good news to be disruptive. But in any event, we are definitely disrupting the energy structure that we have had for the past 100 years, because if you think about the structure of renewable energies, it is completely different to fossil fuels. It is a structure that is much more nimble, it's much more flexible, it is much more adaptive to demand and supply, and it is definitely disrupting cost. So the fact that renewable energies, certainly solar, is now so much cheaper than coal, which used to be the cheapest and most dependable fuel source, well, now solar is actually cheaper than coal in countries even like India, which means that it is a completely disruptive technology that is beating out coal in many jurisdictions. The current winning prize for anybody who's into electricity is 1.7 kilowatt an hour, which was completely impossible to meet with fossil fuels. The disruption that renewable energies are bringing are leading us into a thought space of abundance, because we always knew that we had fossil fuels, but fossil fuels are limited. Thank heavens we haven't completely consumed all the fossil fuels, and we have to leave those that are in the ground, leave them in the ground. But think about, what is the limit of solar energy? What is the limit of wind energy? What is the limit of hydro energy? Those are renewables, those are energy sources and technologies that are beginning to bring us into a completely new world that is taking us from a concept of scarcity about everything, because that's what we have been living with for 100 years, into a completely different thought space of abundance. A very, very different landscape from which we will operate, and the entry point into that landscape is actually being provided by renewable energies, because they are ubiquitous and completely unlimited, as opposed to finite and confined, which is the structure of fossil fuels. So incredibly disruptive technology, both in its structure, but also in the philosophy with which we will approach policy in the future. My second D, which is still on the social side, I'm still on social, is actually a deepening of access to energy. We have, sadly, still 1.3 billion people on this planet who have no access to energy, no access to electricity. What that actually means is that they're condemned to the abject poverty in which they live. Because without basic electricity, there's no way that they could pursue water that is drinkable. There's no way that their children could study at night. There is no way that women could actually cook in a shorter period of time. In fact, you will perhaps know that 50% of all women, it doesn't mean 50% in developed countries, no, 50% of all women, that would mean of all of us women here, 1/2 of us, that is the statistic, 50% of all women still cook on open fires. That is an appalling statistic. And what that actually means is that women walk for 3, 4, 5 hours to go get firewood. Then they walk 3, 4, 5 hours back. On the way, they hopefully get some water and are very often raped. And then they finally get home to make food for their families. That is abject poverty in addition to an absolutely unacceptable situation for women in developing countries. And it's 50% of all women worldwide. How is that possible? Then in the year 2019, we still have that situation. Now, renewables, because they don't have to have a big chunky plant with wires, that go out there called the grid. Well, renewables, you can put a little solar panel on any roof, on anywhere in the world. You don't need to extend the grid, and you can have electricity right there where you need it. Or you can put a small mini grid with wind or many other solutions. So we can electrify 1.3 billion people around the world, meaning that we would improve their, bring them out of abject poverty, and certainly improve the quality of life of women and children. Because renewables definitely deepen, and that's my D, deepen the access to energy by decentralizing the structure, that we no longer have a big power plant, and by doing something that is on the horizon already, but already seen, which is individuating energy. So watch this space, because we will be very soon at the point in which every individual on this planet will be producing the energy that we need wherever we are. Individuation of energy. Completely different paradigm to the one that we have now. I move then to the economic dimensions of the energy transformation. And there, how fantastic is it that renewable energies are devaluing, there's my D, devaluing the incumbents. And let me just give you a parallel example, which is Kodak. Does anybody remember a company called Kodak? Those of us in my age group will remember Kodak. Nobody else does. So Kodak was a company that was 90 years old, born at the end of 1800s. It grew to a whopping, because this was whopping at that time, 17,000 employees, and it grew to be controlling 85% of photographic paper. I know young people don't know what photographic paper is, but it used to be very important. So 85% of all of the manufacturing of photographic paper was completely controlled by one company. That grew to, as I say, 17,000 employees, one of the largest companies in the world at the time. In 1975, the digital camera was invented by Kodak. But they had no idea what they had invented. They turned their backs on it, and 10 years later, everyone was producing digital cameras, and Kodak was gone. In 10 years, okay? That is devaluing the incumbent technology. That is such a quick transformation of technology. And I put it to you that we are currently witnessing the Kodak moment for coal. That is difficult to understand, right? Because coal has been around for 100 years. And we have had coal as the basis of electricity generation for most countries for many years. And it's a little bit difficult to think of the energy system of the world without coal. Just like it was difficult at that time to think of photography without photography paper. Well, we have completely devalued the incumbents with renewable energy, and it is quite amazing that last year was the first year in which we actually closed more coal plants than we approved worldwide. The financial system of the world is decapitalizing both coal plants and coal mines because it's actually become what we call in our business a stranded asset, which is basically a toxic financial asset that loses its value. And hence we are in an accelerated race now to join coal to Kodak photographic paper. Coal has absolutely no positive attributes, absolutely none. It is the worst thing for the health of the planet, and it's the worst thing for human health, because air pollution caused by the burning of coal plus other fossil fuels has actually been shown to be one of the most effective ways of dealing with the fact that we have 7 million people who are dying of air pollution per year now because of the burning of fossil fuels, particularly coal. So a devaluing of the incumbents through renewable energy and causing huge economic shifts and financial shifts, capital shifts into the energies of the future. The second point, which I think is total number 4 for anybody who's into the Excel sheet mentality, my fourth D, but still under economic, is dematerializing energy. How fun is that? I am simply amazed at the fact that we are dematerializing in front of our eyes. We're dematerializing the world. What do I mean by that? Think about your little cell phone that was so rude to interrupt us just a few minutes ago. That little cell phone has dematerialized many devices that you used to own and that are probably somewhere in your basement or storage. So that phone, the little phone, has dematerialized cameras. There are still some cameras, but they're professional. Or those of you who are, really into photography. But do you remember that most of us used to travel around and had a family camera, and every time there was a family event, we pulled out our little camera? Well, how many of those cameras do you see now? We have dematerialized. So we have actually substituted cameras. We have substituted recorders. Do you remember when you used to go around with a video recorder or a tape recorder? Those chunky things? Gone. It's all in this little handy phone. Do you remember the video cameras, right? The video cameras or the phone or the music recorders. Do you remember that we used to have a separate system in the cars for GPS? I think mine was called a TomTom. I don't know what yours was called, but we had a separate thing in the, for those of us who are completely non-geographically oriented like myself, I had to, depend on this thing that would tell me turn left, turn right, da-da-da-da-da. Well, that was fantastic because it saved me from getting lost 3 times a day. But now I do that with my little phone. We have dematerialized music. Who still has your 300 collection of LPs, right? How many of us have our, fantastic collection, and what do you do with them? I mean, they took up a heck of a lot of space, or they still do, take up a lot of space, and then you had to take it out and put it on, and, the little needle, and clean it, and, do you remember that? So now what do you do about music? Spotify, right? Gone. Gone are all of those LPs. I mean, they're still there, and you love them, and you don't want to give them away. But basically, they are, museum pieces, right? So is all of the other technology. I can't remember how many generations of music technology we went through. Who remembers? What did we do? We did CDs. We did what else? We had an Yeah, do you remember? Oh my God, those tapes that you had to oh my gosh. Okay, So, now we've dematerialized music, or at least listening to music. And here's the other one, just as, a little example. We've dematerialized banking. How many banks can still afford to have actually physical stations, or what do they call it? Branches. You see, they don't even exist anymore. Bank branches where you went in and you had a wonderful little conversation with the person there. Hello, how are you? Here's my check. Checks don't exist anymore. So now, banking is all... So we are dematerializing the world. And you can go through, many... Knowledge. Oh my God, who remembers what a library is? I remember what a library is. I love libraries, but they're hard to find nowadays, right? So we used to have a big building, with books, physical books that don't do this. They do this. And we used to go there to find knowledge and answers to our questions. And now, Ms. Google knows more than any possible library could ever know. So we are dematerializing the world. And we're dematerializing energy as well. Think, coal. Do you know that? So I already live in the future, so I'm going to talk about coal as though we're in the past. Do you remember that we used to go and dig huge holes in the ground? Huge holes. I mean, just gaping holes, some of them, visible from the moon. Gaping holes. And then go in there and pull out this black stuff that had to be then washed and contaminate all the water. And then that had to be put on trains, usually, and taken across the country to be then further processed, and then to the coal plant until you finally got electricity. I mean, how on earth did we get ourselves into that situation? And now, solar energy, right? Wind energy. We do not have to deal with this messy black thing that we used to excavate out of the ground. We have dematerialized energy. That is actually a very fun transformation that we're all witnessing. Sorry, I can get carried away about dematerialization because I think it is such a fun thing. But I will move to my next D, which is digitalizing, thank you, the energy systems. Because with digital technology, we're actually being able to improve the efficiency and the on-demand capacity of energy because it is renewable. Very difficult to actually digitalize coal or fossil fuels because you need the immediate response of renewables that are much, much more nimble and have a very quick response rate to be able to do that. You have then, with that, what comes is yet another change of paradigm that is customer-oriented. We used to have energy that was actually producer-oriented. We had these, big plants, huge, horrible plants with big wires going out of them and across the entire country. And energy was basically organized according to the producer needs. Well, now we're moving toward a customer-based emphasis with energy, just like we're doing with health, just like we're doing with banking. Everything is actually being brought to the consumer, to the individual. When do you need energy? What kind of energy? How much energy? When do you need your banking? How much? What service do you need? So you're seeing a process in which we humans are beginning to be in the center of the economic paradigm in many different ways, but including energy. And then we move to the political aspect, and there I also have two dimensions for you. Have you thought about the fact that renewable energy actually democratizes energy? It democratizes energy because think about how many conflicts, wars have been fought to protect the geographic location of fossil fuels, particularly gas, and then how many conflicts we have had to protect the transport routes, right, of fossil fuels. Well, by having renewable energy that is on demand and that is basically where you are using your own natural resources, we are actually being able to democratize the generation of energy and use it for our very own purposes, which disentangles, and that's my last D, disentangles geopolitics. And here, I really want to put a little thinking question for you. How smart is it that a country that is as politically brittle as Israel depends on the import of fossil fuels for its entire economy and for its entire electric grid? Fossil fuel generating countries, I think you know which ones those are. So now, of course, Israel has been smart and hasn't bought or is not buying fossil fuels from those countries, but there are others that are selling to Israel. And what if those countries the day after tomorrow decide, actually, we don't want to sell to Israel? Israel has abundant solar energy, has desert space that could be used for this. How is it possible that Israel puts itself into a geopolitical danger of depending on the import of fossil fuels when renewable energy technologies are here, they're here to stay, they're here to grow, and they have never been as expensive as they are right now because the price is only going down. And this is the country of startups who could actually be dedicated to moving Israel very, very quickly over to renewable energy because that gives Israel energy independence. So that's my little political message for you tonight, to think about that one. However, having gone through these dimensions of the energy transformation, I would pose to you the following macro idea, that yes, climate change is urgent that we address it. Yes, it is a threat. Yes, it is one of the converging crises that we're dealing with. Yes, absolutely. But I put it to you that from another perspective, humanity has already embarked on the construction of what I would call a solutions prism. And that if you see climate change as actually, or addressing climate change as being multidimensional, as I have just put forward to you, and mutually reinforcing, then yes, we start with the environment, but we definitely don't stop there. We can actually transform many of the social, political, and economic realities for the betterment of humankind, and certainly for life on this planet. Because my vision, and yours, I'm sure, is that we all want to contribute to a planet that is, yes, more environmentally stable, but also more economically stable, a planet that is more socially just, and a planet that is politically more peaceful, and there is no country that knows that better than Israel. So thank you very much. Thank you for going on a journey with me. I hope this has helped to give you a little window of thinking into a different world that we're all moving into, which is actually a very exciting world, and we don't have to panic. Thanks.
So you can take a seat again until... Thanks. Well, I don't want to move this, so thank you. So thank you, Christiana, for those inspiring words and thoughtful talk. I'd actually like to invite now Ilana Yahav to come to the stage. Ilana produces art using her hands and sand. And she has specially produced an artistic work for this evening in honor of Christiana. So let's welcome Ilana Yahav. all I can say is wow. So thank you, Ilana. I would now like to invite Christiana to come back to the stage together with Moab Vardi for a short question and answer session and maybe even some questions from the audience. And as you can come up, as Christiana mentioned, 24 hours ago she got the call from Theresa May, and Theresa May doesn't have much time to speak to anyone, and she has to speak to her at 8:15 from my office in this building. So we're going to have to cut it short at 8:10. Christiana has to leave the room, but she'll be back in 8:30 to speak, mingle and speak with people outside the building. But you're going to have to forgive us that at 8:10 we have to leave Christiana and myself. So if we can turn the lights on.
Thank you.
Good evening. This Hebrew announcement will be followed by an English one. ערב טוב לכולם, אני שמח מאוד להיות פה ונעשה שיחה קצרה ואחריה גם שאלות מכם, אנא יתאזרו בסבלנות. So it's an honor to be here with you, and it was a very inspiring and mindful speech and talk that you just gave, and just following that I want to have a few quick questions with you. First of all, in October 2018, the IPCC issued a report claiming that the threshold of 2 degrees that you guys in Paris Agreement aimed for is maybe too risky, and even in 1.5 degrees more than in the industrial revolution, we might face a danger not longer than 2030. Where are we standing now in relation to the objective you set in Paris? And moreover, what are the implications of the decision by the Trump administration to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, given the huge share, the huge portion of the U.S. in global carbon emissions?
Thanks, Moab. 2 very important questions, but I first want to... Oh, did she disappear? That sound was absolutely beautiful, wasn't it? It's just gorgeous. So to your important questions. First, what does the Paris Agreement say? The Paris Agreement says that countries will be at carbon neutrality by 2050, and that stands because that is what science has recommended, and the Paris Agreement is science-based and follows science. It also says that in order to be there by 2050, that we actually have to start the reductions right away. You can see the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. You can measure them either according to the intensity of carbon in the economy, which we've just gone through, or you can see it as a temperature. So there's 2 different ways of seeing it. With respect to the temperature, what the Paris Agreement says is that countries agree that they will not allow the temperature to increase to a very fun temperature, which is called, and I quote, well below 2 degrees. You can tell that that was a political solution, very creative, ambiguity there, for the countries that felt that they needed more space. So there's well below 2, and strive to 1.5. So the Paris Agreement directions everybody to somewhere between 1.5 and well below 2. Well below 2 could be 1.9, 1.8, 1. We don't know. That was the political agreement that was reached at that moment. You can imagine that we had countries that are heavy emitters. We have countries, 42 two countries that are small island states whose survival depends actually on the reduction of emissions. So you have countries in many different spaces, and obviously you have to find political agreements that very often are somewhat ambivalent. So the ambivalence in the Paris Agreement is somewhere between 1.5 and well below 2. Now, the other thing that the Paris Agreement did is it requested this report that you're talking about. The Paris Agreement legally mandated the IPCC to produce a report on the implications of 1.5 degrees because we didn't have that information in 2015. And in fact, when we told the scientists that we were thinking of injecting that into the Paris Agreement, they said, please don't do that because we don't have enough information. Well, we did it anyway because it was really important to very, very vulnerable countries. And hence, science will always continue to develop and give us more detail. But what we know now, as of October of last year, is that 1.5 has got to be the new north. Not well below north and well below 2. That flexibility that we thought we had between 1.5 and well below 2, that flexibility is gone, sort of like the sand art, wipe it off. We're now going to 1.5. And what is astonishing to me is how many companies and investors and alliances, strategic alliances, have actually done exactly that. They have searched in their strategies 2 degrees or well below 2, and they're going for 1.5 because they know that that has to be there. Who has not done that is, well, that too, but I was thinking of the US actually. Because Moab asked me about the United States.
Well, there are some who argue that we are the 51st state. You know, the stars, we are the 51. No, it's not me, I'm just... Okay.
I think 1948 was a very hard won independence. I don't think we're going to give up on that one. Sorry, 1.5. US. Oh yeah, who's that? So here's the deal with him. The universe has a sense of humor, right? And I'm always looking for those sense of humor. So here's the sense of humor about the United States. Given the legal clauses in the Paris Agreement, the first date that the United States could actually legally withdraw from the Paris Agreement is the 5th of November of 2020. The election of the United States is on the 3rd of November, so of 2020. So who knows? Crystal ball, if any of you know whether he's going to be reelected or not, please do let me know so that I can start preparing emotionally. But you know, we don't know if there is another president. That president could come back into the agreement with the sort of sweep of a sand dart, if he or she so chooses. And if he's reelected, then we do have a problem, right? Because the first 4 years has actually not been that much of a problem, A, because he hasn't been imitated by other countries, and B, because at least 55% of the US economy continues to decarbonize, despite the White House, or as I lovingly call it, the dark house, because there's no lights there. So the US economy continues, 55% of the economy continues to decarbonize because they know it's good for them, because they want to be competitive. They don't want to be, you know, with the technologies of the 20th century when everybody is into the 21st century.
Yeah, but they still fall very, very short from the objectives of Paris.
We don't know that yet. We don't know that. The 26 to 28% reduction that the United States took on could be delivered by the 15 states that have taken on their own voluntarily the Paris targets, and by the companies and the cities that are doing that. We have more than 300 cities in the United States that are decarbonizing. We have thousands of corporations. We have 15 states, obviously California being the largest of them. So we don't know. Honestly, it's too early to know whether the United States, independently of the dark house, will actually be able to get to that 26 or 28% reduction or not. More importantly is actually the political message does it send. Does it send a message that is a paralyzing message to China, for example? And that's also very hard to tell, because China could go in two directions. It could either say, well, since there's no lights over there in the dark house, we're not going to do anything. Because they have to do something by 2020 is the year in which all countries have to come back to the table and increase their emissions according to their emission reductions according to the Paris Agreement. So China next year could say, well, since the United States is not doing anything, we're not going to do anything either. Having fully complied with everything that they were going to say in Paris, they're actually way ahead of schedule. But they could say, we're not going to put any new commitments on the table. Or China could say, fantastic. Those people, they don't want to participate of the new economy, therefore we're going to go forward. Because China is the number one investor in solar energy, the number one investor in wind energy, the number one investor in electric vehicles, and the number one investor in electric charging systems, and in batteries. And so, why? Not because they want to save the planet. No. That's not about it, right? They know that there is economic interest here. And they want to be in the driver's seat with respect to where the global economy is going.
Thank you. You are you can feel, and everyone can feel your optimism. And
that evident?
But as a journalist,
Your job is to be pessimistic.
No, I'm realistic.
So am I.
No, so there is kind of dissonance because I'm sitting here and I think, wow, we are going on the right direction. And then I wake up to the news every morning to monitor the world and to report to my audience what's going on in the world. And every day seems to me worse than the day before, because you see disasters, you see this report of the UN experts, not politicians, experts, last October saying that, wow, we are about to go into catastrophe if we are not going to act now. So I want to ask you, not about the philosophic level or dimension, but about practical means. If you judge the line between Paris 2015 and now, the milestones, if there are milestones, the politicians, the countries, governments are going in the right directions. They take the right decisions. They implement the agreement in sort of way that we can say, okay, we are in the right direction.
There is a fantastic word in German, that I don't know if it exists in Hebrew. It's both yes and no in the same word.
Oh, yeah. Ken velo. Gam vegam.
Okay, does that mean both yes and no?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my answer to your question.
Oh my.
Okay.
It's a journalistic nightmare. We are working in black and white.
Sorry, no. The world is definitely not black and white. I am sorry. The world is shades of gray. No, the world is not going in the right direction if you have a political lens on, okay? The way that I understand the reality that I see is I recognize it as being a bifurcated reality. And both realities are true, and I hold them in equal standing. I don't hold one above the other. One reality is the political reality that you are talking about. And so, there you have the dark house, and you have, the Brazil new president, and you have the recent election in Australia. And so you have, pockets around the world of leaders who have not seen where we're going in the future and who are still holding on, anchored, to past realities. That is a very, very important political reality that is there. I'm not diminishing it. It is definitely there. Period. New paragraph. The other reality is what the real economy is doing. And what the real economy is doing is actually being set by countries like China and India. So China, as I just pointed out, is absolutely front in this revolution because they want to export the things that you are all going to be importing. They want to export renewable energy. They want to export electric vehicles. They want to export efficient digitalized technology because they know that that's where we're going. So China has actually already not just complied with what it said it was going to do in 2015, they've actually overcomplied. India, the same thing. So India put in certain milestones that they would reach by 2030. They actually will comply with those milestones by 2020. And so they are actually in a very good place to do what countries need to do next year, which is still a crystal ball reality, frankly. We don't know if they're going to do it, because what the Paris Agreement says is that we knew that decarbonization was completely impossible for any country to commit to in 2015 because they had no idea how they were going to do it. They put it out there as their vision and their, let's say their big goal, but they had no idea, because we don't have the technologies yet to see how they were going to do it. But we encouraged them all to bring their homework to the table, to say, right, so me, China, me, the United States, India, Brazil, Israel, Costa Rica, my country, everybody go home, do your homework, and figure out what you can contribute to this global cause, and then come and put that result on the table. The collective effort of all of those countries, as registered in 2015, is completely insufficient to take us to 1.5. It's also completely insufficient to get us to 2050 with a carbon neutral economy. But we knew that. That was not a surprise. We knew that. And so what we actually decided was it is more important for everyone to get on to this process, as opposed to insisting on perfection now. Sometimes perfection gets in the way of the good. And so we invited everyone to do their homework, bring it to the table, but then legally binding commitment that every 5 years they would come back, do their homework again, see where capital has shifted, what technology has done, what policies they've implemented, and then be able to take a further, more ambitious commitment. That is due in 2020. The United States will not do it. Will China, India, and the other countries do it? I don't know.
But if Brazil and Australia and the United States are not going to do it, it's not going to undermine the possibility to even reach the objective of Paris?
No, because the objective of Paris is a long-term objective, okay? It will be measured in 2050. I plan to still be here. It will be measured in 2050. And so, if I had, excuse me, can I use this?
She's a multi-dimensional artist. Oh my God. You should be on TV. You want?
I'm not going to be artistic. I'm just going to be practical.
Yeah.
So, okay. So the world, can you hear me in the back? So the world has been emitting, right, greenhouse gases, and we've been going up and up and up and up. And last year, we still went up 1.7%. So we've been going up and up and up. Thank you. Now, let's say that this is 2050, okay? So by 2050, we have to be, thank you, by 2050, we have to be back down here, which is basically carbon neutrality. Now, there are, Moab, many different roads to this, okay? The safest road, according to science, is that 2020 is here. This is 30, this is 40, and this is 50. So the safest road is to get to 2020 and then descend like this. Okay, that's one road. That's the safest road. Is it going to be possible? We don't know. But if we do that, then by 2030, this one means that by this time, we would be at 1/2 the emissions that we are right now. So actually, sorry, I didn't do this right. It would be about here. So this is about half, right? Okay. So that, yeah, I'm practicing still. So that's the safest path. Now, there are other paths.
Can it be done without the most, the biggest superpower in the world, the United States, being on board. Can it be done without the US administration be on the board?
No, but I remind you that we have a 10-year span here. Okay? So it has to be done with the United States within these 10 years, by the United States and China and India and everybody. Okay? So those are I think that's my alarm clock for the call. The other path, there are many other paths. The other path, which is a dangerous path, is to continue here, but then, you see, we would have to go down, still meet here, but this curve is a very, very difficult curve. This is the impossible curve. This is a possible curve. This one is very, very difficult. There is another path, there are many different paths. There's another path that says, you know what, we're actually going to what they call overshoot, which means go completely over and then come down. So, and I could put in many different paths here, okay? So the point is, there is not just one. To the point that it's not black and white, there are many grays. There are many paths. This is the recommended path by science. It is the path that gives us most economic stability, and is the best path.
So politically speaking, this is the last minute we can afford Trump in the White House. Just a second. You have 10 more minutes. You have 10 more minutes. She has 10 more minutes. Come on. Because you are in this structure Excel kind of mind. You need to be free-flowing.
Okay, I am. Right.
So, do I make it hard for you here? Okay. Because this is my job.
You do your job, I do my job.
Exactly. But I envy you. You are doing, I'm only telling stories about people who do.
I don't know. I think.
Oh, that's okay. Here is the thing. Don't we live in an evil magic circle, which is the...
What kind of a circle?
Magic circle.
A magic circle.
But an evil one. Vicious.
Oh, a vicious circle.
Vicious circle, sorry.
Okay.
So, because the possibility to change course in the end of the day is in the hand of the politicians, of policy makers, most of it, sometimes. And just a second. And of course, let's see Trump, right? Trump could change course, and he decided to remain in the course of fossil fuel and coal. But in order to change it, the people who are going to be hurt, who are going to lose, are either his constituencies or huge international energy corporations. And usually, the politicians has no interest to change course because it's either going to hurt their voters or these huge corporations, which are sometimes their career depends on. How can you break this vicious circle? How can you break this you know?
No, I understand your point, but I think it's actually already being broken. So let me use the United States as our favorite example tonight. For whatever reasons, right? We can go into that later if you want. But for whatever reasons, Donald Trump decided that he wanted to, have this war against climate change. Fine. Now,
it's because he wanted to be re-elected, and he needs these guys in the coal mines in West Virginia and Pennsylvania who depends on coal. It's
also because he got huge donations from fossil fuel
companies. Exactly, that's what I said. Voters and donations by these energy corporations.
Okay. So that was the reality whenever he was elected. Now, he has tried to claw back many of the regulations that were put in place in the United States to decarbonize the economy. The fact is, none of those attempts, although he puts his big, huge signature on all of these things, none of those have actually been successful because there are so many legal suits against those attempts. So none of them have actually gone into effect. He, of course, does a huge press conference and a lot of tra-la-la and, gets a lot of attention from the press and from us. But the fact is that, he hasn't been able to take them into effect because the economy, and we're back here into the bifurcated reality, the economy understands that they're better off moving forward. My latest pet example, one of the last things that he invented 3 o'clock in the morning was that he was going to roll back emission standards for vehicles. And so he got into this huge fight with California because California, the independent Republic of California, decided they have the best fuel efficiency standards in the United States and they want to keep them because they're actually being really affected by climate change and they don't want to be a part of the problem, they want to be a part of the solution. So, so they got into this legal fight that is still ongoing, but he insisted that he really wanted to roll back even further. What happened? 17 of the 20 large manufacturing companies of cars in the United States, the CEOs of those 17 companies, wrote a letter to Trump saying, don't do that. Don't do that.
Because they want to remain equal with the other states, not because they want to, to reduce, to cut emissions.
No. They're doing it. No. This has nothing to do with greenhouse, gases. This has nothing to do with environment. It is sheerly an economic argument. The car manufacturers say, whoa. It is completely uneconomical and unviable for us to produce 2 different types of cars. Am I going to produce one car for California and another one for Ohio? That makes absolutely no sense. And so they said, don't roll that back because we have to have one production line. We have to be able to be efficient in our production because we're competing against all of the other countries that are trying to get the U.S. market. So it is sheerly an economic argument, right? This is not about saving the planet. This is not about, environmental, No, it is sheerly an economic argument that makes sense. Those who are seeing where the world is going, and that is not questionable. The world is definitely moving toward decarbonization. Those who see that would rather prepare for that world rather than keep themselves anchored in the world of the past.
Last question, because we really need to finish. Can you give us, I would say, a clue or an advice? What every one of us
can do.
Yeah, but not in terms of, throw your SUV away or go with your...
I have 5 things. I have 5 things that everybody can do. Number 1.
We did not talk before.
Number 1, if you're still eating red meat 7 days a week, you're not doing yourselves a favor. You're actually doing your body harm. And it's just not good for your body, right? So I don't mean that you have to go from 7 days to 0 overnight, but that should be your target. And you can start from 7 days to 6 to 5 to 4, etc. You're doing yourselves a huge favor. You're also doing something important for the planet. Sorry? Transport. Number 2, if you're transporting yourselves with a huge, fossil fuel burning thing that has 4 wheels, and particularly if you're transporting yourself individually, you're not doing yourselves a favor. It's not good for your health either because you should do more exercise. But it's also not good for the health of the planet. So, share rides, walk more, use the little electric, what do they call those lime things? Scooters, use your bicycle. Get out there and get more exercise because you'll live longer. And so will the planet. Number 3. For those of you who live in air-conditioned homes, make sure that your home is properly insulated, because if it's not properly insulated, you are cooling the entire neighborhood, let alone the entire city, unnecessarily. It's bad for your wallet, and it's bad for the planet. So make sure that you're insulated properly. Number 4, if you are in the age group that has some disposable cash, make sure, and you have investments and savings, make sure that those investments are not in high carbon assets, certainly not in coal, because you'll lose your money. Okay? So it's not good for your old age security, financial security. It's also not good for the planet. And finally, those of us who have the privilege of living in democracies, vote with your head.
Thank you so much, Christiana Figueres.
Okay. So before we end, I think I have to rush upstairs with Christiana. Mrs. May is waiting for a talk. So let's all thank Christiana for inspiration and her talk.